name is Jeff Bannerman. I'm the water commissioner out of the Stafford Field Office, and I've been living in this area since 1990. I've been working with the Stafford Field Office since about 2000, so I'm kind of your local representative here. I remember when I first started, right out of college, I was wet behind the ears, and when the partnership was formed in 1993 that tried to address the shortages in the Rattlesnake Creeks. Of course, at the time, we were dealing with problems in Walnut Creek, which eventually led to Hydrological in that basin. And just believe me when I say that all parties pretty much don't want to be in this room tonight, but it's an issue that everybody's been working on for a long time, and it's time to get this solved. With that being said, I know this is a personal and difficult issue for everyone affected, but I hope we can conduct ourselves with a professional manner, and so that we can convey as much information about related to the Quivira impairment investigation and finding a solution. Before we begin, I want to cover a couple housekeeping issues. The restrooms are out in the foyer, off to the right, and emergency exits are located at the front and 2 in the back. If we have an overflow crowd, there will be a room out in the foyer and a sound system set up, and there's also, they're doing it in the basement of the library, so that everyone in the foyer can hear the presentation. We have an extra projector and screen, so the slides will be playing out there as well. Also, all of today's meetings are streaming live on the KDA YouTube channel. With that, I would like to introduce Kelsey Olson. Kelsey is the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture for KDA.
Thank you, Jeff. Let me find my clicker. Helps if I turn it on. I just want to give a little bit of overview about the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Our mission is that we are here to serve Kansas farmers, ranchers, and agribusinessmen, and we do that by providing an environment that enhances and encourages the growth of our industry and our economy. We advocate and promote our agricultural industry and help to ensure that we have a safe food supply by protecting our natural resources and promoting public health. We've got 18 different divisions and programs in our agency, all of which in some fashion or another support and promote agriculture. And we believe that to its fullest and really live that every day in what we do. Kansas agriculture, sorry about that, is the leading driving economic impact in the state of Kansas. There's over 64 sectors that affect Kansas agriculture. When we look at this region specifically, we've got 25 of those located here in the Rattlesnake Basin or the Great Bend Prairie. It's the #1 source of employment and the #1 labor income driver. And this is not just looking at direct ag, but we understand that the indirect ag that supports the community and the group as a whole. So when we look at this issue, it's not taken lightheartedly because we understand that this is a main driver for this part of the state as well as our state as a whole. So within the Division of Water Resources, this group was originally set by the Water Appropriation Act in 1945. At that time, the governor wanted a different law in regards to our water resources and our water rights. The outcome of a committee that was put in place was the Water Appropriation Act that we have today. That established first and right and first in time for both groundwater as well as streams and above ground water. Another unique thing that this did was establish the chief engineer. This individual is set out in statute to not only protect our water rights, but as well as administer those water rights. And that's something that we rely heavily on, and is part of the reason why we're here today. Over the years, between 1945 and 1995, there have been multiple amendments to that. Some of those include our water planning statutes, our groundwater management districts were established with that. They created the ability to transfer water, as well as the temporary water flexibility, which allowed for the drought term permits. That's something that we relied on quite heavily in our state and in this area in 2011 and 2012. So we're here today to discuss a water right, which is held by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Over the years, the service has complained many years that their water right has been impaired. And it wasn't until 1993 when a group of individuals came together to discuss what that impairment would look like. And so over the years, the Fish and Wildlife Service, GMD5, the Division of Water Resources, and WaterPac all tried to come to terms on how to mitigate the impairment from a voluntary basis. This unfortunately had not led to any success over the years, which puts us to April of 2013, when the service filed their impairment complaint and as well as the request for water. It is the duty of the chief engineer to protect your water right and your neighbor's water right, and this is when the impairment was requested, and this is a senior water right that's held in Kansas that is overseen by the chief engineer. Our intent for the meeting was to start out to explain the letter that was received in the notice of pending actions. Since that letter has gone out, there's been a lot of stimulated effort by yourselves as well as our legislators to work with the federal agency to try to find a way forward. And for those of you who are not aware, Senator Jerry Moran on Friday released a statement that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had made a verbal statement to them that they would not make the request for water at this point. Since there's not been a request for water, we do not feel that there's a need for the administrative orders at this time. So what we want to do is to continue to provide you facts and to talk about the situation and to work to find a solution forward. It has not changed that the impairment is occurring and has taken place, and that we still need a solution to go forward. We hope that we will continue to have local leadership from yourselves, as well as with the service and with KDA and the Division of Water Resources to continue to move this issue forward and not lose sight of that. So to give you a little bit about what we're planning to do today. So you should have all received an agenda that was printed before the announcement went out. So we've made a couple slight variations of that, but the overall intent is the same. Our plan is to review the Quivira impairment. We will explain the planned administration and show some of the likely elements that we believe are solutions to the impairment, and then take your questions. Due to the size of our gathering and the fact that it would be very difficult to get everyone a microphone, we provided you with cards that we hope that you will use to take your questions, and we will address those as they come up. We feel free to write them out during the time. We will have some individuals that can gather those. We also have baskets in the back if you'd like to place them there. But at any point, you can hold that card up and we'll gather those and we'll address the questions at the end. Our intent is to have a 2-hour meeting. To basically the first 45 minutes or so will be to provide some background information, and then we'll go into addressing the concerns and the questions that you guys have. But again, we're not, this isn't a public open comment time. It will be written questions that we will be addressing. With that, I would like to introduce our Chief Engineer, David Barfield, and he will take it from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. Okay, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking time to be here this afternoon and hear about this very important issue that's, as Kelsey has indicated, that's, and Jeff as well, has been sort of in discussion for decades now, really, and been really the subject of a lot of effort to understand and to try and figure out how to move forward by department, by GMD5, and others in the area. So it's a very important issue, and we understand that. We wish that this was not such a difficult problem, and I'm going to get into the particulars of why this is a difficult problem and needs some very significant measures to remedy. We have no real pleasure in coming up with administrative orders that place restrictions on water users, but under state law we have a duty to perform for a senior, and we need to do that. But our desire is to try and find a way forward that provides as much flexibility and time and so forth as possible. And we'll talk about that in a bit as well. As Secretary Olson mentioned, we heard Friday late afternoon, actually after the close of business, for a press release that was forwarded to us that Senator Moran had some discussions with an official, a fairly high official in the Department of Interior over the Fish and Wildlife Service that indicated that before taking this action of working through issuing administrative orders, that they wanted to make another attempt to come up with a locally driven solution to this problem. So we don't really have many particulars about what they have in mind in terms of process for going forward, but that's the indication we have, and our process is once, you want me closer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can hear myself talking, so I appreciate that. So our process is, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, is we have a very definite process for investigating impairments and for taking actions. And one of the things we require is before we'll administer a junior for the benefit of a senior, we require what's called a request to secure water. We require them to put in writing, I want you to administer the junior for my benefit. So the service, we've actually been dialoguing with the service. They've provided that request to secure water for the last 2 years. We believe they were going to offer that, request that this year. That was the basis of sending you the notice. But with this announcement, this changes really today's conversation, and it changes the path forward. So we'll come back to that here in a minute as well. What it doesn't change is the science and the law here. Okay. The groundwater pumping in this basin is having a profound effect on stream flow. I'll talk about that in a minute. That is leading to regular and significant impairment of this water right, and we need to find a remedy for that. And so the service's announcement, or Interior's announcement, says we're going to try and find another path to remedy the impairment, and I think it also changes the timing of action here. So anyway, we appreciate you coming as we dialogue this. My presentation is going to sort of overview the problem and the steps that have been taken to date, and then just talk briefly about the path forward. So, all right. Okay. So before I talk about the problem, I want to talk about what the problem is not. So obviously, that's okay. So, all right, we got this. So obviously, the Appropriation Act, I have duties. We have duties all across the state, and this is a map showing the Ogallala and High Plains Aquifer, of which the Great Bend Prairie Aquifer is a part of. In western Kansas, as most of you know, we have a significant problem with depletion of the groundwater reservoir. This map depicts the percentage of the saturated thickness of the aquifer that has been depleted, and the browner areas are bad. So as you see in this part of the world, we have some groundwater depletion in storage here, and much more moderate in the middle, and even some areas that are rising or stable. So groundwater declines is not the driving problem here in terms of a water resource problem. So that doesn't mean the groundwater is not affecting the surface flows, which is really what the problem is. Okay, so problem number one is that junior groundwater pumping is in this area, just due to the geology and hydrology of the area, as groundwater pumping pumps, it is intercepting water that is destined for the stream as base flow. Base flow is the part of stream flow that results from groundwater discharge into the stream system, as opposed to runoff, which is also part of stream flow, which basically comes from runoff events. So this depiction here, so GME5 developed a groundwater model for the district. We actually, as a division, were part of the development process. I was a part of that. We have our expert modeler from our interstate cases that provided peer review to make sure that this model was the best science we could make, and we believe it is good science that we can rely upon as we look at these problems. So the model makes projections of groundwater discharge into the stream system or base flows, and how those change over time and how our activities affect that. So we have two lines here that look at what discharge, what base flows occur with groundwater pumping in place, which is the green line, and without pumping in place. The model can predict if we didn't do groundwater pumping, what would happen. As you see, there's a very significant decline in base flows in that reliable part of stream flow that's been occurring over the years and decades. So this is 1970. So irrigation development, occurred largely in this area, and as it developed, then we have a reduction in stream flows from what it would have been without that pumping. And this is really the heart of the problem, is that reduction in stream flows is resulting in Quivira not getting the water it needs when it needs it. So the second problem is related, and that's, so historically we have fairly significant depletions that are occurring. So the model can actually also look forward and say, what's going to happen in the future? What are the trends? Where are we going in terms of the groundwater system itself, and also the groundwater interaction with the stream system? And so this is taken from a model run. Again, we use blue groundwater's GME5 groundwater model. This actually is this is an output from one of their models of their baseline, which looks at if we keep going as we're going now with the current level of groundwater development, what happens? And so not only do we have significant depletions historically, but we have the current level of pumping in the basin is essentially going to dry up the stream flows. All right, and I'm not keeping up with things, but so the third related problem is, as we dry up the stream, what happens to water quality in the stream? The refuge is a saltwater complex, and so it doesn't have to have pristine water, but there's water that's too clean for its functioning, and there's water that's also unacceptable on the other end. And so we have here a depiction of this is data. Data has been collected in the basin, and Tom Stiles with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment has been helping us to assess the augmentation plan that we'll talk about here in a minute, and basically assembled. This is actually the water that's in the rattlesnake as it enters just above the refuge. And the thing I want you to see here is that so we have increasing flow on this axis, and we have increasing chlorides, which is a key measure of water quality on this axis. And as we have less flow in the stream, we have poor quality water that's occurring. And so drying up the stream creates several problems. It creates the original impairment. It creates the prospect as we go in the future that those impairments are going to be more frequent and deeper. And it creates the problem going into the future as we dry up the stream. We're going to be chronically delivering to the refuge a quality of water that they can't use. Okay, so that's the basis of the science. Although I'll give you more a little later. So as Kelsey indicated, in 2013 the service came and asked for an impairment investigation and action if impairment's found. 2016 we filed the final impairment report that found based on the model work and analysis we did that impairment was happening regularly and significantly. And so efforts began, and GMB5 took the leadership here to determine with us how do we resolve this. So the first effort, GMB5 desires to develop what's called an augmentation project as a primary piece of the remedy. An augmentation project, these things are done in the West pretty commonly. You basically find a separate source of water and you pump it in to replace, in this case, the depletions to stream flow that are leading to the impairment. So, and I'll talk more about the particulars of the project here in a minute. So, but they basically had a concept for a project. At this point, they went to the service twice and basically offered their augmentation project as a remedy for the impairment. The service indicated that while augmentation is an acceptable part of the remedy, as long as the quality were sufficient, that they believed in addition pumping reductions need to happen to make that project sustainable over the longer haul. So that was their position. So when the GMD and service could not come to, I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up here. I'm just going to throw all the words at once. So when the service and GMB could not agree, the GMB came to us and said, what's necessary, Chief Engineer? We can't get the service to agree. What do you believe is necessary? And the specific question was, what's necessary in addition to the augmentation project that they were planning to pursue? So we did an analysis, and that analysis, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but we've provided that. It's on our website. We provided the analysis and all the backup to GMD and its modelers. But basically, we said, what does it take to stabilize stream flows? Again, those stream flows that have led to the impairment are leading to drying up the stream and the water quality problems. So we found through doing some model runs, it would take a 30% reduction in pumping, not to restore stream flow, but to maintain the level of stream flow that currently exists in the stream. So we basically established that if they could develop their augmentation project, which would provide essentially would sort of cover the past depletions that were occurring and provide a dependable supply to the refuge they could call upon, that half of that 30% or 15% would stabilize stream flows to the degree that we could say you're satisfying the impairment. Let me get all the words up there. Okay, so this is just a little graphic to sort of illustrate what I'm saying. So again, we have the stream flow. This is a very simplified, this is kind of a noisy basin. We have wet years that produce lots of runoff and recharge and even additional place flow. Then we turn around, we have dry years that follow and average years that produce little. But basically we're trending down in stream flow, which means that these other problems I was talking about happen. But in addition, the augmentation that we basically sized based upon our analysis that went through 2007, because that's when the model stopped, is going to be more and more insufficient to offset those. So the pumping reductions are necessary to keep the augmentation project viable, to keep some level of stream flow in the stream and to prevent unacceptable water quality degradation. I'll cover that next piece in here. So the augmentation project. I'm going to throw all the words up. So they've got a conceptual idea of where to put this and what it should look like. They provided that information and some of the modeling behind it early 2018, I believe. And we've reviewed that. We actually asked Tom Stiles again with KDHE to help us review that. And we believe that some level of augmentation supply can be developed on the site. We strongly support augmentation as a crucial part of this, and we've been working hard to provide the GMB with feedback. We've developed we supported state law changes that basically were passed in 2015. It says if in the Rattlesnake Creek Basin an augmentation project is provided, it will be considered by the chief engineer as he considers what's necessary to remedy impairment. So I'm required to do that. We also developed a memorandum of understanding with GMB5 just to make that crystal clear. We're developing a regulation that will allow them, because the basin's closed to new appropriation, to open up an area that isn't fully developed and open it up for new appropriation for augmentation. This would, one of the biggest costs of augmentation projects, typically well over half, is purchasing water rights that would supply the augmentation project. So this would allow, because they're an area that's very undeveloped, because there's some bad water quality stuff underneath, it would allow them to basically develop a project without having to purchase water rights. So there are some concerns here. Again, underneath the proposed well field, and they're proposing a series of low capacity wells, shallow wells in areas south of the refuge, outside of the area of influence. So that's good, but there's more work to be done to determine what level this augmentation project can sustain without inducing upwelling of those poor quality waters. So, and once it's up and running, it's going to have to be carefully monitored again to make sure that doesn't occur. So again, we support augmentation. Kansas, one of my jobs is being commissioner of the Republican River Compact Administration for Kansas, and as you know, we've had two Supreme Court. We've gone to the U.S. Supreme Court on that twice because Nebraska was overusing their project. They're part of the water supply, and Nebraska's essentially their remedy for their non-compliance was doing two things. Two things that are very similar here. They basically put in allocations in the three natural resource districts in Nebraska, 9 inches for the lower, 11 inches for the middle, and 13 inches for the upper, to stabilize the stream flow. And then they developed augmentation projects to offset the historic depletions that occurred. And it's been a great benefit to Kansas because we can depend upon, when they're overusing and we need the water, those augmentation projects provide us the water we need. So again, we support augmentation and believe that the basin ought to develop that as quick as possible. Okay, so the next phase in this was a discussion with the GMB about how to remedy it. So we have an augmentation project that needs to be developed. We have a certain amount of reductions in pumping that needs to be implemented in order to stabilize stream flow. So in 2017 in August, they came and wanted to use a mechanism that's allowed under state statute called local enhanced management areas. This is and a number of you will be familiar with the Walnut Creek IGUCA, Intensive Groundwater Use Control Area. This is a very similar mechanism. Basically, there's a hearing process to determine, to look at a particular water resource, groundwater resource problem, and figure out what should be done about it, and if corrective controls should be ordered to address the problem. So that's done in the IGUCA process. In the LEMA process, basically, the GMD proposes the provisions, and then there's hearings to determine should that happen or not. So So the GMD wanted to use a LEMA to basically, the augmentation project cannot be ordered in a LEMA. So the LEMA they would bring, the basin brings, but the LEMA is used to bring the pumping reductions. The GMD proposed to do pumping reductions in a general sense by removing end guns and other voluntary actions over the whole area, and then some focus reductions along the creek, 4,400 acre feet, to reduce the overall reductions that are necessary. So we had a lot of discussion, back and forth, sharing of information and model runs and so forth. And basically, after just under 2 years, well, in February, they provided a LEMA proposal, their second one. But unfortunately, I was not able to approve that LEMA proposal, as it didn't include key elements that are necessary to comply with state law. Local enhanced management areas provide for, again, a mechanism to address a problem through corrective controls that are prescribed in the plan. The LEMA plan that they had a list of things they believed were necessary and should be done to remedy the impairment, and the list was a good list, but it did not, it does not, their goal in the LEMA was to resolve the impairment. They did not include in the plan the schedule to complete those actions. Specific required reductions were not prescribed, and there was no consequences if those actions were not taken. So because of those and other reasons that are detailed on our website, the LEMA had to be rejected. All right. Okay, and I'm running out of time here, so I'm gonna. So that led to the situation where I have an impairment report, and I found impairment 3 years ago. The service is asking us to take action. I'm not taking action for 2 years to let this process play out, but I have no plan that's addressing the impairment. So that's how augmentation is an idea, but it's not available, and it's going to be years to develop. So delay longer was not consistent with my requirements in the state law, and we believe really isn't consistent with the basin's need to find a remedy, because if a remedy is not found, then there could be other avenues like litigation in court or whatever to address the flexibilities that we're talking about. So that was the plan forward. And so the proposed administrative orders were sent to you. They were developed anticipating that the service would follow a request to secure water, which they have not done yet, which is why they did not issue orders, but issued a notice. We wanted you to have plenty of opportunity to figure out how you would deal with these. The overall reductions on the order is about 14%. Now, because of the way the allocations were provided, the actual effect on individual water users varied greatly. Some water users got more allocation than their historic use. Some, the junior water rights, typically got less as well. So the orders were planned to be phased in over 3 years. I'll cover that real quick here. So we intended to, again, this is not going to happen now because the service has said we want to do something else, but I want to go over, we intended to issue orders for 2020 for this yellow area. That's about 1/3 of the water rights, about 52% of the effect. And then orders in the green in 2021 and the red in 2022. Almost half of the effect on the refuge is actually from pumping that's quite distance from the stream. So the allocations, so there's lots of different ways to do allocations. We were doing this under administrative orders, or plan to do it, so we basically wanted to use the authorized quantity and the priority of the water right to determine how much allocation each water right gave. Now, a pure way of doing it would basically just be to take the most junior water rights and shut them off 100%. So in order to have the same hydrologic effect, we would have had to shut off 100%, 500 of the most junior water rights. So we didn't believe that was the best solution for the basin. We believe that I have discretion. I have a lot of discretion in the state law because we have to apply the law to many, many different situations. So rather than shutting off 500 completely, we decided to honor priority by giving more to the senior water rights and less to the junior water rights. So those are manifested in the allocations. Oops, sorry. We did not base the allocations on historic water use. To do that would encourage use it or lose it, and actually statute says I will not base allocations on historic use without giving due consideration to conservation. So that's why we use just priority and authorized quantity. Okay, I'm going to stop here. So we realize that some of the senior water rights have, as I said, have more allocation than use. The more junior water rights, have quite a bit less in many cases. So we realize that's difficult. So one of the things that we've done here that Chris Badel, Program Manager for Water Management Services, is going to talk about is we have another law called the Water Conservation Area that allows for the creation of water conservation areas. And we plan to use, again, this is not going to happen right now in this way, but plan to use that statutory ability to develop flexibility to use those allocations in a more flexible way. There's a lot of people in the state that are subject to allocations. We have the Walnut Creek that you're familiar with. We have Alima in Sheridan County that you might have heard about. We have people that voluntarily go into water conservation areas. And two flexibilities that water users want when they're in allocations is multi-year flexibility and the ability to move water around among their water rights. So Chris is going to talk about that, and then I'll come up and wrap up. Okay, Chris.
Thank you, David. I only have a few slides, and I'll make them brief. David covered a lot of the stuff that I was going to talk about. But before I do get started, if anyone has a card filled out with a question on it, just raise your hand. We'll come around and get it from you. If anyone needs a card, we're going to try to stick to the cards with the questions thing, but it just makes it more orderly. Thank you. Okay. As David said, we thought a long time about how to give flexibility and try to craft this administration to be the least impactful as possible, knowing that we still have a job to do. We have a hydrologic target to meet. But one of the things that we know that can make a difference if you're on a reduced water supply is the flexibility to use that water supply. And so we thought, we thought that the water conservation area tool was a natural fit for this. This tool was created in 2015. It works on a consent agreement between the water user and the chief engineer, and no intervening parties, really. It's just whatever those two parties can agree to. We thought that worked well because no one would be forced into this water conservation area. And it allows for flexibility of use in water allocations in whatever ways that the folks can dream up, really, that we can do within the law, and it won't hurt anyone else. We'll probably take a look at it. What we find that most people want is multi-year flexibility. They want to be able to use a lump of water, say 5 years worth of their authorized quantity over 5 years. If you have 100 acre-foot water right, you'd like 500 acre-feet to use over 5 years, because that gives you the flexibility to use more when it's a little drier, and then save some when it's a little wetter, and then roll that allocation or whatever into the next water conservation area. So that was the big tool. The other one is the ability to move allocations between water rights. So whether those water rights are your own water rights, or whether you want to trade them, buy them, sell them with other folks who have need or anything like that. So we had a pretty elaborate system that we were going to roll out in this water conservation area, and I was going to go through the allocation sheets that we had. But I think the tenor has changed a little bit. I hope the tenor has changed a little bit with this announcement from Fish and Wildlife Service that they're not going to be calling for water, at least in the foreseeable future. We don't know exactly what they're going to do, but anyway, those are the main points I was going to cover there. And for the movement of allocation, because this is a hydrologic-based target, we're trying to slow the growth rate of stream depletions, then it makes sense that if you move water from a place where you're impacting the stream more to a place where you're impacting the stream less, you can actually increase the face value of that water right. You can pump more in a lower zone than you can in a higher zone and have the same effect. So we wanted to reward that. If there's folks that wanted to move their water out of zone D, or the higher impact zones, to somewhere out, away from there, maybe they could sell that water or something and try to offset the financial effects of that. So those are the kind of the highlights, and those are all the slides I had to present. So I'll turn it back over to David.
Actually, I just have one more slide, and then we're going to get to just have one more slide to kind of wrap up, and then we're going to move to the questions, because that's really what we're here to do. We tried to anticipate some of them in the presentation, but didn't provide a lot of detail. We want you to sort of drive the detail in terms of what questions you have about what's going on here. So the big question is what happens next? And actually, this is a big question. Because, as I said, we have indications from Interior and the service that they want to provide an opportunity to work with the basin to find a different solution. Again, this was just announced in a press release. We've been trying to find out more about what's behind those words in that press release, and really haven't been able to get any details for you. So we don't know the process that Interior and the service have in mind to look at other options. We don't know what they might expect, what time frame they're looking at. We tried to get the information, but the press release is pretty much all we know. So no orders will be issued because they have a process that they say they want to go through before providing a request to secure water. If they decide they won't file a request to secure water, then we will, unless indicated otherwise, we'll proceed according to plans that we've outlined here and basically you receive notice of. But it's really incumbent on the water user in this case to tell us they want us to do that, and they're telling us at this point they're not wanting us to move forward. So we encourage you to sort of stay engaged in this process. We're obviously, we have a very significant website on this issue. GMB5 also has a very significant issue. So again, we'll keep you updated. We encourage you to be involved. And one thing I didn't cover earlier, I covered how we did allocations for purposes of water right administration, okay? So under that, those are not the only way to do allocations. So there's other ways to accomplish what we believe is the necessary reduction goals than just considering priority and authorized quantity. In Lima's, for example, in Northwest Kansas, we have 2 local enhanced management areas. They're based on inches per acre. So they allocate a certain number of inches. And so you could base an allocation system on providing a certain number of inches. You give more inches to seniors, less inches to junior if you wanted to. We didn't consider proximity to the stream, but you could set up an allocation system where those that are closer to the stream carry more of the weight, and those further from the stream carry less of the weight. We actually provided the GMB tool because this is really one of the things that's very challenging, is to figure out an allocation system that is fair and appropriate. But anyway, as whatever discussions happen, I just wanted to let you know there's more flexibility in a Lima or an Iguca proceeding in terms of how those allocations are done. But certainly how we did it is one way that could go forward. So the last encouragement I'd give you is, augmentation needs to happen in this basin. State law says if augmentation is broad, it will be considered. And so work with GMB5 to get that project done, because it's really one of your key protections as we move forward through this process. So with that, I think Dana's going to come and shepherd the Q&A process.
Thank you. I'm Dana Ladner, and I'm with the Compliance and Outreach portion in the Ag Marketing Division at the Department of Agriculture, and I will be leading the question and answer portion of this afternoon. And a number of you have already submitted questions to us. For those that are over at the library, Cameron is over there with that. And if you're here in the big room or in the foyer and you have questions, raise them up, and a staff member will get that with it. Or if you need more cards, let us know and we'll get those distributed to them. What I'll ask is, we'll address it to one of our folks up here, and I'll ask them to stand when they answer the question. So the first one is for Chris. Explain the difference between senior water rights and junior water rights.
Okay. Water rights in Kansas are based on the date in which they were filed for, really. So a senior water right is a water right that's filed earlier than a junior water right, and it's all relative. So in the context we're talking about here, Quivira's water rights 75-71, I believe, and that is senior to 93% of all of the other water rights. So what that also means is that before any junior gets their water right, Quivira's water right has to be fulfilled. I hope that answers the question.
We will get this figured out on the microphones and where we need to go. Sorry about that. So for David, will you approve a settlement between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the basin if it is different than your stated criteria for solving the impairment? Will you approve a settlement between Fish and Wildlife Service and the basin if it's different than your stated criteria for solving impairment?
All right, I like easy questions. The answer is yes. So again, just to give a little bit more, the service filed the request for us to do an impairment investigation and action. They filed a request to secure water. They basically have been essentially leaving it to us to determine what's necessary to remedy the impairment and get it done. And so that's been the basis of us moving forward. Service has now said, to me anyway, this is my read, we want to enter into this. So if it's really their job to protect their water right, and if they want something less than what I believe is necessary, we'll approve that. We'll find a way to implement it.
Thank you. The next question will be either for David or Chris. Why is the Nenasko Basin included in the administrative area? Why is the Nenasko Basin included in the administered area?
And let me go back up to the map here. Maybe. Turn this on. So, here it is. So again, we have the GMD5 groundwater model. So one of the things is GMD5 came to us and said, what's necessary beyond the augmentation project? We did a lot of runs of the groundwater model to determine who actually is affecting the flows in Rattlesnake Creek at Zenith, just above the refuge. So formerly, we sort of targeted the whole Rattlesnake Basin as the targeted area, but basically ran the groundwater model to determine what was going on here. And we actually did I forget how many, about 800 runs in the end. And essentially, and this is a technique that Blue Groundwater used in their model report. They did a bunch of model runs. They looked at what's the impact of pumping on stream flow. And essentially, we basically inject, you do the model run, a base run, and then you do hundreds of model runs, each at different locations, essentially adding water to that particular cell and running the model to determine what happens at zenith. So this map here, in another more specific version on our website, basically looks at how much of the pumping comes from the stream. So we didn't use surface drainage boundaries to determine who should be shut off or who should be regulated, who shouldn't. We actually use the groundwater model. So we do have areas. Obviously, the rattlesnake generally is closest in proximity. It's the greatest effect. We do have areas in the Minnesota to the south and the Arc to the north where the groundwater pumping is affecting the flow of the rattlesnake. There actually is a portion of the rattlesnake basin itself that's in the rattlesnake drainage that is not affecting zenith. So we're not going to regulate people where there's no benefit to the impaired line.
Kelsey, this next question is for you. And there was a question on Facebook yesterday from the event page for today. And it said, I'm curious why I'm hearing rumors of the Kansas Department of Agriculture threatening extension agents and forcing them to comply with the chief engineer. Is there any truth to this? Curious about rumors of KDA threatening extension agents and forcing them to comply with the chief engineer.
So first off, that is not true. We, in anticipation of this meeting, we thought it would be in our best interest to reach out to third-party neutral individuals who will be a resource to the community and to water right owners moving forward. We thought that it would be advantageous for us to provide accurate and complete information to those individuals. And by doing so, we conducted a meeting last week to crop consultants as well as to K-State Research and Extension to try to make sure that they were equipped with the right information and could help individuals and producers make the best decisions going forward. So by no means was that meant to be a persuasion of an individual or a group, but we thought that based on the goals of the research and extension, as well as crop consultants and helping make management decisions in the area, we thought it would be in our best interest to make sure that they had the right information going forward as well, and knew what we were planning on doing as regards to administrative orders. So it was not in collusion or was not strong-armed or forcing them to do anything, but in their role, in their capacity, wanted to make sure that they had all the correct information.
Thank you, Kelsey. The next question is for David. Can the refuge request water in a year that their water right has been fulfilled? Can the refuge request water in a year that their water right has been fulfilled?
All right, good question. So again, Quivira is not being impaired in every single year. You know, there are years like this year. We had two back-to-back very wet years. Again, this basin tends to, the water goes in and we actually can have some base flow and other runoff events that can sustain them and have. So there's two pieces to the remedy, at least as we as envisioned it. Again, what the service has in mind and the process going forward, I can't speak to, but I'll speak to what we were envisioning in a remedy. And there's two pieces. One is the augmentation piece, and one is the overall reductions and focus reductions. So the focus reductions need to happen because we can't turn wells on and off and produce a hydrologic benefit. Well, we can, but basically the part that's seeking to stabilize the stream flow sort of needs to happen on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, that doesn't happen. So the augmentation project, though, will basically run or not run, will be called for or not called for, according to whether the refuge is being impaired, whether they're entitled to that water right. So again, the augmentation quantities will go up and down, but the long-term reductions to stabilize stream flows are an ongoing thing. So hopefully that answers the question.
The next question submitted was for either David or Chris. Why not use a more gradual phase-in approach, such as partial cuts, over several years to wrap up to full cuts? Why not use a more gradual phase-in approach?
Well, that might be an easy one to answer now because that might be moot. But our reasoning was that we've been given or filed a request to secure water. The service has filed a request to secure water the last 2 years. We've held them off and said, look, we're still negotiating, we're still trying to get to a solution. We were posturing ourselves so that now that we have a plan in place, if we've received that request to secure water and we're expected to act, we're ready to go. We tried to phase it in and tried to strike a balance between what we could do, give some time to adjust, give some time to build augmentation, give some time to make targeted reductions, and that's the balance that we struck. So I think that's the answer.
Thank you. The next question was, will you please make these slides available online and let us know the internet address today? Other way? It will be, I don't know this one. Am I going the wrong way? Heather? At the very end? Oh, way back there. It will be at agriculture.ks.gov/Quivira. And the second meeting today is over about 9 o'clock, and we're hoping to be out of here by 10. And so on our way home, we'll see if we can get it connected, but if not, definitely tomorrow, the slide presentation will be up at that address. So Jeff, we've got a question for you. How will KDA quality control the specific wells and zone locations? How will KDA quality control the specific wells and zone locations?
Well, what the field office is planning to do is to go out and visit every single one of those wells. And one of the things that was in the groundwater management district's LEMA proposal was to seal the meters to the pipe so that they can't be taken out or reversed or anything like that. So the plan was to visit everything, do some random compliance inspections to make sure that meters were working. And along those lines, there's probably a few meters out there that don't meet current specifications. So we're going to be going out and doing some meter compliance checks to make sure that everybody's meter is good and running and works in the basin.
David or Chris, can we get more detailed zone maps? And how will KDA enforce a plan like the one proposed? Can we get more detailed zone maps? And how will KDA enforce a plan like the one proposed? One or both of you?
Well, the first one's easy again. So we do have on our website, I don't know if you have access to the website, but we have a very detailed map on your reports. There's a column that talks about the stream response. So again, the simplified map I had of zones A, B, and C, basically zone A has a stream response between 10 and 20%. That's zone A. Zone B has a stream response between 20 and 30%. And zone C has a stream response of 30% or greater. But every section has a value in terms of the percentage of of the wells pumping that is long-term coming from the stream. And as Chris mentioned earlier, if in fact we ever move forward with this, or there could be a WCA connected with, or the same sorts of flexibilities in a LEMA document. But our thought on flexibilities that we could offer is, if you're moving away from the problem, we could give you more water because you're not affecting the stream as much. And if you need to move closer to the stream, we could let you do that, but you'd have to take less, and it would be on the ratio of those stream responses. But there is a very detailed map that shows the value for every section on our website. So the second question was on enforcement, and I think the answer is the same way we do water right enforcement right now. I mean, we have a very active compliance and enforcement program that follows up, that does random checks, to make sure people's meters are working and so forth, and to follow up on people that are over pumping. And I imagine we would just have a larger program, probably more staffing to do that here.
David, you might as well just keep standing up on this one. You mentioned the economic impact of ag on the state of Kansas. Please address the economic impact of Quivira versus agriculture, particularly if ag is restricted further in the future. You mentioned the economic impact. Please address the economic impact of Quivira versus agriculture, particularly if ag is restricted further in the future.
So water rights and impairments, in water rights, all water right uses are treated as much as we can the same. So there's no priority system for water rights where I prefer a municipal right over an irrigation right. I mean, it's basically our system is your priority is your place in line, and we administer based on priority only. So I'm not really charged with looking at economics as I do water right administration and say, well, because that water right is more valuable, I'm not going to administer them for the less valuable water right. That's not the way our water law works. Okay. Now, I did mention that as we're seeking a solution to this, economics are not really guiding us, but part of what we do, KDA in the Division of Water Resources is supposed to be pro all the uses of water. I mean, we work hard every day to help water users come up with solutions consistent with state law and the public interest. So in this situation where we're having to regulate a large body of water users, my point was we're going to try and find a way to do that regulation that has the least economic harm, and that's why we've designed the phase-ins and the flexibilities that we provided. So I hope that answers the question.
Chris, the next question is for you. Is municipal water being restricted? Are livestock wells going to be restricted? And when you say the model shows impaired stream flow, are you using the complete model or only a partial model? Are municipal and livestock wells going to be restricted? And regarding the model on stream flow, are you using the complete model or only a partial model?
Thank you. The answer to the first two questions, municipal water rights, livestock water rights, all water rights are treated equally. So yes, wherever they fall in their place in line. And again, this was our plan that doesn't appear to be imminent now, but that is the way we structure the planned administration. It's just straight up water rights administration. If you're junior, you're going to get less than the senior, regardless of your use made of water. The question about the model, are you using a complete model or only a partial model? We're using a complete model. We did use the part of the model that affects zenith. We identified it with the complete model. I think that's what this question, man, I'm going to speculate here that this question was generated by the fact that we have a one-layer model versus the Blues 7-layer model, but it's Blues 7-layer model collapsed into 1-layer model. But whenever we made big decisions about how much was impairing, how often, and all these things, we used the 7-layer model, the full model, because we did not want to get crosswise with anybody saying we were using the same model that Blue was. So.
There was a follow-up question that was similar to explain the difference in your model interpretation of the balloon model. So if there's anything you want to add to that from what you just stated.
Explain the difference in your interpretation of the balloon model. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure we have different interpretations of the model. I don't believe we, David, do we have any different interpretations of blue with the groundwater model? Yeah, not with the model itself. I know that Blue has expressed some opinions about about the impairment, the degree of impairment, and what it takes to resolve the impairment. And we do have some different interpretations about that. But about the model itself, I don't believe we have any substantive differences.
David, the next question will be for you. How does the public interest and/or economic impact figure into the decision to administer? How does the public interest and/or economic impact figure into the decision to administer?
I think I touched on the economic impact of that a minute ago. The Water Appropriation Act, in the section that deals with water right administration, doesn't say anything about economic impact. I guess I interpret the laws as really not allowing me to consider economic impact when I make decisions in terms of who I let pump water and who I don't let pump water. First in time is first in right, and the law says that a junior appropriator cannot prevent water from getting to a senior appropriator, and there's nothing in the statute about economics in that equation.
What about public interest?
So the question is public interest. So again, I don't think public interest is explicitly mentioned in that statute. So it's just based on priority of water rights. So I do have public interest in other statutory requirements, but there's nothing explicit. So.
Anybody else has more questions as we keep going? Let us know. Hold up your hand. We'll get your card to go with it.
You didn't read my question.
We've got a lot more coming.
We've got a lot more coming with it. I just went back and got another stack. But if anybody else needs cards or have something, let us know with it. Jeff, speak for you. How is the water level at Quivira measured? How's the water level at Quivira measured?
Really, measuring the water level is pretty simple. At DWR, we have both electric tapes, which beep when we hit the water and measure them from ground surface. Then we also use chalk tapes to measure what the depth of water is. I don't know if that's gets your question or not. But.
David, why is the use of N guns still allowed in this area? Why is the use of N guns still allowed in this area?
N guns, I mean, basically the statute says that I cannot allow waste of water. That's one requirement. N guns are a beneficial use of water, and so they are allowed. That's the answer to that question.
All right, Chris, does the Hayes transfer request have an impact on Quivira or any of the proposed solutions? Does the Hayes transfer request have an impact on Quivira or any of the proposed solutions?
The short answer is no, we don't believe it does. It's not impacted in the model, not implicated in the model, and so, no.
Chris, the Rattlesnake Creek is an intermittent stream. Why do they get to request water every year?
Well, so this goes back, at least in my mind, to the impairment analysis and report in the first place. So when we determined how much and how long the refuge was being impaired, we did two model runs. And we said, how much water would the refuge have got but for the junior pumping? So that's the question we asked them all. We just turned it off and said, all right, if no more water development had happened since 1957, how much water would be there? And then we looked at how much water was actually there. And then we overlaid the refuge's demand schedule loosely. And we said, well, when they didn't get their water because juniors were taking the water, that's the definition of impairment. So intermittent stream, if it was in the record, the model showed it in the record, and that was included in the determinations of the model. So I don't know that it's true they get to request water every year. Well, that remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. That's kind of a speculative question anyway. So, is there more I could add to that?
David, the next few questions will be directed to you. The first one is, how long will we have to try and develop a local solution? How long will we have to develop a local solution?
So the answer to that is I do not know. As I said, we pretty much gave you the press release. Kelsey mentioned. Again, I actually reached out to my contacts with the service because this came as a surprise to us. We knew Representative Marshall has I met with him and person just privately pretty much with him and one of his staff a number of weeks ago, and then he with a group of people a couple of weeks ago. And Representative Marshall had indicated that he was working with the service in DC and essentially asking them to provide more opportunity to find a local solution. I've not been in contact with Senator Moran, but so I knew there were efforts to secure that agreement from the service or Interior, but basically Friday's information is the first confirmation, and I don't have any particulars. So really, again, it's the service's water right to protect, and so until they tell me to act, I'm in wait mode. We'll support them and we'll support the basin as the service tries to engage the basin, but they're in the driver's seat now. They've kind of taken me out of the driver's seat in terms of determining what to do moving forward. So,
All right, David. Your next question will be, what will happen to leases and deposit accounts that are in the water bank if administration occurs? What will happen to leases and deposit accounts that are in the water bank if administration occurs?
okay. So again, this is if administration occurs, which isn't going to happen, but if they file a request and we switch back to this mode. So there's regular leases and then there's safe accounts. So there's regular leases that are already on the books. We'll let them sort of finish up, but basically there'll be no, during the period of administration, the bank will, we will not allow leases, deposits and leases and safe deposits, because basically if the water right is impairing, then additional use by that water right is going to impair. So we would have to figure out whether we just sort of freeze the accounts. You know, they're leaky, and we just haven't got to this level of detail yet because we haven't got the request to secure. We might, and quite frankly, I'm not sure exactly how this would work because I don't know if the law really provides any direct guidance, but I would look to the possibility of sort of maybe freezing the account. So if we come out of administration, they would still be there. But basically, there'll be no deposits or withdrawals during the period of administration.
I think I might have gotten that last question wrong. I think what they were going for was how Quivira is measuring their water diversion. And what I wanted to say about that is, in the past, they've used an ISCO Doppler system. They have 3 points of diversion on the refuge, and they have a series of canals that come off of each of those 3 points of diversion. And in the past, they've used an ISCO Doppler system in each one of those canals. Measuring surface water is quite a bit different than measuring water in a pipe. And we just got meter repair or replacement forms. They're going to a new Doppler system that's going. It's updating everything. They're going to have real-time information coming into the office instead of having to actually go read the meters. It's going to be so. Anyway, that's how they are currently measuring the diversions at Quivira.
Thanks for that clarification, Jeff. We had a question that kind of came in that says, this is the map we got, and doesn't match the one on the screen. You are correct. The staff member that is responsible for that added cities and some highways to it. That's the only difference on that map, is we were asked at the meeting that we had with the consultants, agronomists, and extension personnel a little over a week ago to add some additional information to make it a little bit more clear. And so the only difference on that is we added some locations to make it a little bit easier to read. And like I say, we double checked with the staffer that is here with us, and those were the only changes that were made to that map. So David, we've got a question for you. Why was the boundary set at the 10% impact zone? Why was the boundary set at the 10% impact zone?
Good question again. So, so let me back up to the map. So this is a challenging question. You know, where to draw lines is always a challenging question. One of the issues that we faced in drawing the lines is this red area is far from the stream, and again, the percentage of the individual wells pumping that comes from the stream is significantly smaller than further in, but about 25% of the reductions in flow at zenith is coming from zone A, and something a little short of that is coming from zone B. So even though a relatively small percentage compared to those in zone C and comes from the stream, that area is having a very definite effect on stream flow. So again, that's why we went out that far. We're trying to capture as much of the effect, and in essence is sort of spreading the load against everybody within that area. Now again, I mentioned that we're basically in the proposed orders are treating everybody in the whole area of influence the same, and that's one of the complaints we have from those on the perimeter is I'm not having as big effect, I shouldn't be treated the same. In a LEMA proceeding or some other way, again, I mentioned allocation systems can be done different ways. You could, you can have the people on the inside do more, but under priority administration, this is the way we chose to do it.
Great. Chris, Got one for you. I've heard WCAs out west are abused because they move water from bad wells to better wells. How is a WCA helpful here? I've heard WCAs out west are abused because they move water from bad wells to better wells. How is a WCA helpful here?
Well, on the first point, I have not heard that they've moved water from bad wells to better wells. But even if they did, the whole point of the WCA is that it is reduction. It's a water conservation, so water use is being reduced, and in exchange for that is flexibility to move water around. So if the overall net effect is that water is being saved, I think that we're satisfied, as long as no one else is being impaired, of course. But so that. And how is WCA helpful here? Well, I think it's helpful in that it just provides those tools, multi-year allocations, and ability to move allocation around among your own wells and between water right owners. Those are the main features I think that would be helpful here. And then, of course, there would be no additional reduction required with the WCA associated with administration because you're already taking the reduction. So, yeah, I think that's it.
I'm just going to add to that and basically disagree with the assertion of the card. We don't believe WCAs in Western Kansas are being abused. Yeah, I mean, basically, this is a tool that was developed. It's a consent agreement between the chief engineer and the water users. It's purely voluntary. Nobody's forced to do it, and I'm not forced to agree to it either. And so we look at these very carefully. Every one of them is individual. Where water users want flexibility, and you can conserve water. In Western Kansas, water doesn't move that fast, and so you can do a water conservation area without consenting with the chief engineer about just pumping less. But water users typically, to get the greatest value out of reduced use, want flexibility. And sometimes their junior wells are better than their senior wells, and they want to move water from one to the other within certain limits. We look at every single one of those flexibilities and make sure that nobody in the neighborhood is being injured. So we don't agree to a WCA where it's going to injure a neighbor. It's pumping less water in total. We look at every single flexibility. So I just wanted to add that. Again, as Chris said, the orders are basically causing the conservation, and we're just trying to provide flexibility with the WCA.
David, another question that we've gotten states, why did you wait until now to move forward with administration? Why did you wait?
Well, the last couple of years, we were working with GMB5 to come up with a solution. So we told the basin, based on that progress and the belief that we would sort of get there, that we're delaying so we can come up with a solution to the impairment. So that's why we didn't do it in the past and why we moved forward, because essentially progress had stalled, and it was time, and again, another year had gone by, and it was time for us to do something in our duties under state law, and really, again, our belief to protect the basin from potential court action or other action that might force a solution that doesn't provide the kind of flexibility we can provide with our tools.
David, how long has augmentation been used on the Republican, and how long would it take to determine if Rattlesnake Creek augmentation is successful? How long has augmentation been used on the Republican, and how long would it take to determine if the Rattlesnake Creek augmentation is successful?
So we actually have two augmentations projects in Nebraska that they use, and one augmentation project that Colorado uses on the Republican River. I believe those projects came online. Let's see, the one on Rock Creek was about 2014, and I think Encore was 2015, somewhere in that area. And I think 2014 was the Colorado project as well. So roughly 4 or 5 years, those projects have been ongoing. So how long would it take to determine if rattlesnake augmentation is successful? So the Colorado project and the Nebraska projects were both developed in areas of pretty deep water and fairly good water quality. So there really wasn't some of the questions that we have about this particular augmentation project were not questions there. These areas had a long-term, hundreds of feet of saturated thickness underlying them. So here again, we're in a fairly sensitive area with respect to this quality issue here. So some test pumping needs to be done. The GMB actually, as I understand, is working on a contract to do some testing. And I know, again, our consultation with KDHE says we believe our augmentation project can be developed here, but it's going to have to be carefully monitored to make sure we're not creating an upwelling from the Wellington Formation down below. So I don't know that I can say the specific number of years, but certainly additional testing needs to be done to get a better handle. But really, I think it's going to be ultimately operating the project that's going to answer the question.
All right, we want to thank those that are watching over at the library on the live stream and are out here in the foyer, and we are getting your questions sent over to us. And one of those includes, since water typically runs from north to south, why are areas south of the refuge being targeted? Chris, you want to handle this one? Since water typically runs from north to south, why are areas south of the refuge being targeted?
Well, where the water goes to is all informed by the model. I mean, when they built the model, they put all the hydrologic information that we have in, all the hydrogeology, all the water levels, stream flows, runoff, everything that they could, all the it's like a catalog of all the hydrologic information that we have. And then it's math after that. So the model says that the areas that are on the map are the ones that are affecting 10% or more of their pumping is coming from water that was destined for stream flow. So, that's it.
Chris, we're going to follow up with you. Is augmentation from the Arkansas River possible?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe. We would have to see some sort of a proposal, and we would look at it like any other augmentation project. So.
Okay, I'll put a star on that question so that we may make sure we go back and look at that as we keep going. David, is there a final date that the service could request water for 2020? Is there a final date?
That's a good question, and it's one that we have not come to a conclusion about. We've had some discussion. Water rights in surface water systems. We do those systems in terms of water administration in real time. So it's June 15th, and you're on the North Fork of the Solomon, and you have a senior water right, and upstream of you is a junior water right that's taking water you need. June 15th, you request. We go out there and look. We find you have no water, and junior upstream is taking water that you're entitled to. You sign the request secure. We go and administer them. So we do it in real time there. So and that's really the way a lot of our water right administration is done is real time. But that's in surface systems. So here we have a more complicated system. We have some water rights that are fairly close to the stream that are fairly immediate effect. We have a whole lot of water rights that are distance from the stream that are affecting that. So we've we're reluctant to, if the service does a request next summer, we're probably not going to honor that request. We're probably going to say, but if they give you 3 months and for some reason decide the process hasn't yielded what they wanted and they file a request, I'm going to have to do some consulting with my team and my legal staff to decide whether I can ignore that request at that point or not. So there is, I just don't know what the date is. So
You can keep standing here. David, will the Quivira be required to take any conservation actions? Will the Quivira be required to take any conservation actions?
so the answer is yes. Whenever we do water right administration, or we're regulating juniors for the benefit of seniors, we do require the senior to have a conservation plan to essentially make sure that they're using, they're not wasting water, they're using water effectively, and the service has a conservation plan on the books right now. It's out of date. We've requested that they update their conservation plan. They went through a process a few years ago to look at the refuge, not just their use of water, but to look at all different aspects of the refuge's operations and make sure that it was as good as they could make it. And one of the things they looked at was how they used water. And so the conservation plan they have now on file, which I think was done around 2000, is not up to date. They actually have provided us with a draft update to their conservation plan, and all the stuff that we've been doing to sort of deal with the impairment has taken priority over reviewing and interacting with them on the conservation plan. But that's on our list of things to get done.
Secretary Olson, we've received a few questions regarding the emotional stress this could cause. And who will be there to help with that? Who will be there to help on the emotional stress that will be caused?
Well, first off, I really appreciate that question. As we know, times are tough in agriculture with the trade tariffs that we're seeing at the federal level, as well as these local issues that are impacting us one-on-one. When I first came to KDA, which was in July, the issue of mental health and our well-being as agriculturalists was something that was weighed very heavily on me, and so did with Secretary Bean. So one of the things that I've been working on very closely with our team, we are in the process of developing a website specifically for the agriculture industry. This is going to house information that is relevant specifically to farmers and to producers, to women in agriculture, men in agriculture, anyone who potentially is having financial stress or emotional stress. We just want to provide as many resources that are out there and house them in one consistent location for the agriculture community. So in the coming days, maybe just a couple, 2-3 weeks away, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but our website should be up and running. That website is going to be Kansas, spelled out, ag, A-G, stress.gov, oh no, not gov, .org, excuse me, kansasagstress.org. And that resource, we will be communicating that as broadly and widely as possible. We plan to work across with all different stakeholders in the state, partners in regards to the commission, crop commissions, livestock groups. We plan to work in close as possible with everyone and get that information out there. Unfortunately, it is a really tough and stressful time. Some of it is the nature of the industry, but we know that there's a lot of factors that are impacting us directly that we don't have control over. So we want to provide as much information out there and provide those resources where it's easy to find and easy to access. So please look for that in the coming days, and I certainly appreciate that those couple questions that have come in. Thanks.
Thank you. David, explain how surface water diversions work in Kansas, and why can the service let water pass until they decide they need it? Explain surface water diversions and how the service utilizes it.
Okay, so, water rights entitle you to make use of water for a particular use. They allow you to divert at a particular rate and a particular quantity. Typically, the water user chooses when they want to divert. That's consistent with their purposes. Cities divert all year long, peak in the summer, less in the winter. Irrigators pump dominantly in the summer months. So let's just take the Kansas Boston Irrigation District up on the Republican River. They choose, or an irrigator on any stream, they choose what crops that they plant. So their crop needs will determine when they divert water. So they let water go by the stream all year long until they need it. And when they need it, they're entitled to use it. And again, if there's so if it's if it's July 15th, and the surface irrigator on the Solomon River or wherever needs water, they're entitled to divert it. And if an upstream junior appropriator is preventing them, they're entitled for me to take action. So that's how it works.
Might as well stay put, David. Does the way the service manages and stores water constitute a waste of water? Does the way the service manages and stores water constitute a waste of water?
Well, we don't believe so. If we believe that, we would need to put a stop to it because I'm obligated to not allow waste of water. So our observation of them and their diversion patterns says they're not wasting water.
We've got about 15 minutes left in the question that you guys have submitted and some answers that we have for you. So we'll continue to get through the cards as quick as we possibly can. Jeff, how will water meters work when you pump out your tailwater pit and the meter is still on? How will water meters work when you pump out of your tailwater pit, the meter is still on?
I'm kind of assuming that they mean that their tailwater goes through their irrigation meter. We actually have a rule that requires that to not happen. Everything that you should be reporting on your water use report that you actually pumped and irrigated is required to be metered, but your tailwater is not required to be metered and should not be metered.
Secretary Olson, how do the KDA promote the economy and DWR trying to cut water use balance the different statutory duties when dealing with this problem? How does KDA work with these different statutory duties when dealing with this problem?
As I mentioned at the beginning, our mission is to support agriculture, protect our food supply, as well as our natural resources. So that's our overarching mission, and it really varies from one division or one program to the next on how we do that. A lot of our divisions are statutorily or have regulations that are enforced in law by state statute, and that is particularly true on this case with the Division of Water Resources. They are tasked, based under that Water Appropriations Act, to protect all water rights. And those, as we mentioned, was first in time, first in line, and when there's an impairment, we have to identify assess if there is an impairment, and then carry that out based on those state statutes that are in place. So in this particular case, I know that depending on the perspective and the stance of where you're standing, it can be difficult to understand why we have to protect the water rights. But it would be no different. We would be here in the same case if it was, it didn't matter who that impairment was being made on and what that right was, the water was being used for. So overall, we're here to protect the natural resources and the water right laws that are in place in the state of Kansas. And I know it appears that it goes against the Kansas Department of Agriculture's mission and what we're posed and tasked with doing in regards to the state as a whole. But within the statutes of Division of Water Resources, we are doing our best to protect your water right as well as your neighbors and the next one down the road, whether that be a municipality or a livestock water right or an irrigator water right. So we just do our best to try to address the impairment and make sure that it's carried out to the letter of the law as best as we can.
Jeff, the next few questions will be for you. Is the water measured as it comes onto the refuge or only as it is diverted within the refuge? Is the water measured as it comes into the refuge or only as it is diverted within the refuge?
How that works is Little Salt Marsh is part of the refuge. That's a surface water feature. And what happens is it's measured at the zenith USGS gauge, fills up the Little Salt Marsh, and that's a lake. There's no way to meter a lake. So, and then there's like 3 points that come off of Little Salt Marsh. But, 3 points of diversion downstream. One is at Little Salt Marsh. The next one is a little bit further, and then the next one's a little bit further, and those all have Doppler flow meters. There's 7 total Doppler flow meters there, but we are talking, part of this conservation plan is trying to quantify what's used at Little Salt Marsh, and I think the plan is right now to require some staff gauges and other things to help quantify exactly what that number is, but it holds about 3,000 acre-feet.
Another question that came in that you can answer is, has there been consideration for cleaning out cedar trees in the basin?
Well, I know that Water Pack and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nature Conservancy have been working kind of collaboratively to clean out salt cedar and other invasive species along the creek upstream of the refuge. And I heard a statistic not too long ago, and I can't remember what it was, how many miles they've actually. But this is continuing to work. How many miles upstream of the refuge that they've been cleaning that out on.
Jeff, either for you or David, what water is Quivira entitled to in a severe drought year? What water is Quivira entitled to in a severe drought year? One of you will need to answer.
I'm gonna take the first stab at this and then let the expert talk about it. But in my in kind of the short explanation of that is they're entitled to the difference between what would normally be in the stream and what is taken by junior groundwater pumping. So there's a if the normal stream's here, well, sorry, but if the normal stream's here, and depending on where the weather is, and many times it might be dry, but it would be here if the junior groundwater pumpers weren't pumping. They're kind of entitled to that intervening amount.
David, can you please briefly restate why augmentation alone as it was recommended by Baloo. Briefly reinstate.
So I interpret the question you made, why augmentation alone is not sufficient. And you've got the word brief, because I'm not always brief, I guess, So again, briefly, augmentation is, so first of all, we don't have augmentation. We don't know where we're going to have it. We don't know really what degree of augmentation is going to be available. So one reason we need something besides augmentation is to get something started to remedy the impairment. But assuming augmentation at the scale that they're planning is available, we still need some cuts to stabilize stream flow because we cannot allow the stream to be totally dewatered. It's subject to minimum stream flow. The more it's dewatered, the more augmentation pumping is needed. The more problems we have with water quality degradation that again is linked to the junior groundwater pumping. Because again, if we didn't have junior groundwater pumping, we'd have better water there. So water quality degradation is a form of impairment. So that's my short answer.
Chris, what is the impact on stream flow of the administrative orders? What's the impact on the stream flow?
Okay, so the proposed, if I'm doing that, I'm really sorry. I don't know what that is. So the proposed, another word for that word, okay, proposed administration was, the hydrologic goal for that was to reduce the growth rate of stream depletions by 1/2, okay? So let me unpack that phrase a little bit. Stream depletions caused by groundwater pumping continue to grow. The stream flow continues to go away. It's going away right now, even though it's the difference between, I like to think of it, between weather and climate. This year it's been very wet. That's been kind of the weather. But the long-term climatological signal is that the stream flow is going away over the years. And it's caused by this groundwater pumping. So our target was to slow how fast that was going away. So I guess I would summarize by saying the effect of the stream flow was to slow down the rate at which it's going away. It won't stop it from going away. It's not going to restore the stream flow. It's not going to make it come back at all. It's just going to slow down how fast it's going away so that augmentation can last a long time. Because why would you want to spend many millions of dollars on an augmentation project and have it deteriorate with the stream flow going away and the water quality going away? So that was the goal.
David, is it possible to convert all or part of Quivira's water right to a groundwater right and let them drill their own wells? Why or why not? Is it possible to convert all or part of Quivira's water right to a groundwater right and let them drill their own wells?
So this basin is closed to new appropriation, so they wouldn't be able to get an appropriation at this time. Now we are opening, I mentioned earlier, we were opening part of the basin to allow this augmentation project to move forward. But that skimming project, that project is envisioned to skim water off the refuge. It's going to yield a limited quantity of water. So the refuge is not in a place to drill deep wells and pump a lot of groundwater because the groundwater below is nasty stuff. So it just won't work at that location.
I'm going to turn this back over to Secretary Olson because we have run out of time, but we know there are still some questions we didn't get to. We will take all of them with us and consider them all very thoughtfully. If your question did not get answered, You can email it to us or call us at any time. And the email and address and phone numbers are on the agenda along with the website. So with that, Secretary Olson?
First off, I just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come out. On behalf of Secretary Beam and myself, we understand that this is a very big issue that we're dealing with, and we wanted to make sure that we could provide as much information to individual water right owners as well as just the local community and the locals in the area. I do want to apologize that we are limited at space. When we came and decided that we wanted to have a meeting, the number one item was we wanted to make sure that it was here and local. Unfortunately, we're kind of limited on our options, and we've tried to do our best to accommodate everyone. Those in the foyer and those listening online or at the library, we appreciate you coming and participating. And I apologize that I had to ask personally for some of you to leave so that we could help stay within the realms of what the fire marshal has set up for this space. But again, thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening to the information that we had to provide. This is a priority to not only us, but to obviously the community and the individuals impacted as well. I really hope that the news release of the Fish and Wildlife Service asking for more voluntary input and efforts on all of our parts, that we are able to use this as a renewed spirit and sense of energy and motivation to help address this problem going forward. I think this is a great opportunity that when we have the motivation right now to bring forth ideas and try to find a way that is agreeable upon as many people as possible. And so it's not going to be easy, but I know that you guys can help bring forth some quality local input, and we can make a plan going forward. Just again, thank you for helping with the questions. I hope that you feel like as many of your questions were addressed as possible. We will be posting these and we'll have them online. And if anyone put individual information, if they wanted followed up with any particular questions, we will be doing that as well. So thank you. We'll be around here to address any other one-off questions, but appreciate your time, and we look forward to working with you going forward. Thank you.
Yeah.